Yep. So today's topic is Active Directory. Anybody heard about the Active Directory before this class? Have you ever heard?
No, sir.
Okay. See, this Active Directory is nothing but it is one of the service of Microsoft. We call it as an identity and access management service of Microsoft. It's a proprietary service of Microsoft. Okay. Only Microsoft has got Active Directory. No other. I mean, we have other identity and access management services, but Microsoft proprietary is Active Directory. Okay. So why do we need Active Directory? Because if you are not having an Active Directory environment in the estate, in the information tech, in your office, okay, the management burden will be very, very huge. Say, for example, if you have around 10 to 20 computers, the management will be very easy. But when you have more computers like 10,000, 20,000, or lakhs together computers and lakhs together of users, the tracking mechanism is very, very easy, and also the administration burden is huge. Okay, so that is the reason we need an identity and access management service, and that is called as Active Directory in our case. So before we get into that, let us understand how the client and the server are interconnected in the real time board. Okay. See, I already told you there are two components in the IT. One is the client computer, another one is a server computer. The client can be anything because client is always a consumer. He always consumes a service or an application or any, for that matter, any information for the matter. But the devices can be anything. Either you are using a mobile phone to access an application called Facebook. We use mobile phone. Sometimes we log in on what laptop, and sometimes we even log in on desktop. But the end user computing, I mean, the end user devices may be vary, but the application is same, because the server which is hosted the application is same. Maybe the media we are accessing the application is different. Okay, that is the client and the server. So to access an application which is hosted remotely somewhere, we don't know where exactly the Facebook application is hosted, but we use the medium called internet. Correct, right? So any application to access any application from a devices, we need to have a network. The network, either the network can be internet or intranet. If it is a public facing application like Facebook, Instagram, those you need to have the internet. But if it is within your office internal application like your leave portal, your HRMS portal, or maybe any other your insurance portal related, or there are multiple applications inside that office. Okay, so to access those applications you don't need to have the internet, you can even access within the corporate network. So basically the client and the servers are interconnected with the help of the network. The network can be either internet or intranet. Okay, so this is about the client and the server in architecture. Okay, so what are all the clients? You already know the clients can be a machine which is running an operating system called Windows XP, the very old operating system. Then Windows 7, Windows 8, Windows Vista, Windows 10, and Windows 11. The currently in the market we have Windows 10 and Windows 11. The rest all are legacy. We don't have support from the Microsoft. You can install the operating system by downloading the image from the Microsoft website or any other third-party website. You can configure, you can have the operating system ready, but Microsoft will not give you any support if you face any issues, and Microsoft will not release the patches, the monthly patches to fix the bugs or to fix the vulnerabilities. Okay, with respect to before Windows 10. Windows 10 and Windows 7 currently in the support, and you will get the support from the Microsoft. So these are the Windows client operating system. If I talk about the server, there are multiple flavors of Microsoft server operating system, starting from Windows NT. So till 2022, currently the latest operating system, the server operating system we have of Microsoft is 2022. Okay, so 2016, 19, and 22 are in support now. 2012 is in extended support. Extended support means, so Microsoft give you an offer. If you are running the operating system 2012 in your on-premises, if you migrate that workload to the cloud Azure, I can give you 2 years of extended support. I can give you the patches, I can give you the support for the 2022 operating system. Okay, so if you have no extended support, then it will be legacy only. So if you ask me, the on-premises, the Microsoft gives the support only for 2016, 19, and 22, three operating system. Microsoft is currently giving the support. Rest all are legacy. Okay, this is the client and the server. Little bit background about the client and the server. Now let us jump onto the work group and the domain. Okay, so I told you, when you install an operating system in the infrastructure or in your home also, by default that computer will be there in the work group. If you go to computer renaming properties, okay, it by default shows you the machine is in work group. So then we have to understand what is the meaning of a work group. So work group is nothing but, if you break the word work plus group, means it is a group of computers at your workplace. The computers are interconnected peer to peer, means if you have 10 computers, the computer 1 can talk to the remaining 9 computers in the network, but the computer doesn't exhibit any security. Say for example, if you have kept your data in the computer 1, remaining 9 computer can easily access your data. There is no control, there is no administration, or there is no governance. You cannot monitor what's happening within all this, between these 10 computers. Okay, another one easy example I'll give you. Say for example, you have a laptop or a desktop at your home. You may have a username to log in different username. Say for example, you and your brother or sister is using the same computer. While logging into the computer, you use your username and password. But once you log into the computer, you can open the same D drive, E drive, you can play the same movies, you can see the content, everything same. You can also see your brother content, or your brother or sister can also see your whatever content you have stored in E drive and D drive. There is no security. You can copy the data, you can delete the data, correct? You can modify anything and everything in case of work group. That is the security risk we have in case of work group. Another thing, say for example, you have some vulnerability came. So what is that? If you insert the pen drive or USB stick, the computer is detecting a trojan, or any kind of malware or threat. Okay, so then your management tells you immediately stop disabling the pen drive for all the 100 computers you have at your office. Imagine you are the only one engineer, okay, and 100 computer to log into each and every computer and disable the USB option is a painful job. 100 computer fine sir, no problem, we can do maybe 2 3 hours, it will take time, but I will do it. Imagine organizations like 10,000, 20,000 or lakhs together of computer and users, it is not a viable option. Correct, right? So that is the reason the administration burden in terms of work group is very, very difficult. Okay, because each and every computers will act as an independent machine. Okay, because they have independent storage, independent login mechanism, and you need to remember all the 100 computer username and password. That is the biggest headache, right? So to overcome out of these issues, okay, then we have a solution called domain. So domain means, is it clear? Work group is clear, guys. Work group is nothing but it's a peer to peer connection. If you create the username, that username is restricted to only that computer. So if you have 100 computers, you have to remember 100 username and 100 passwords. But in case of domain, it is not like that. One username with domain admin privileges, you can log into all the 1 lakh computers you have at your office. Okay, that one username is enough. You can control anything and everything. Not only clients, you can even control the server operating system as well. Okay, that is about the work group. So you have a lot of challenges in terms of work group. Okay, then to overcome out of that issue, we have find a solution called domain environment. So before we get into the domain, let us understand what is domain means. See, domain means it is a security boundary. If you want to access any services or any information, you have to prove your authentication. Mean authenticity, how to prove? You have to prove, yes, I am the authenticated user. I am just entering my username and password. Okay. Once you enter the username and password, that password will be validated whether the user is present or not in the estate, then only he will be able to log in. If you look at the picture here, work group and domain, one second. Yeah. If you look at the picture here, right, work group and domain, na? Here the computer 1, 2, 3 and 4 are interconnected. And if you see this computer, all the four computers are acting as individual, independent. See, even though they have connected, interconnected between the net, I mean via network, they are in the communication. But if you create a user one in the computer one, he will be only able to log into only computer one and not for computer 2, 3 and 4, because you are going to create the user account in the computer itself. But in case of domain, if you look at, you have a server here as a central point of contact. See, and all the computers are connected via network. This is a switch. Anybody can talk. All the computer can talk each other. But here, what we do, we will create the user account not in the local computer. We are not creating the user accounts here. We will create the users here. User 1, user 2, user 3. And then we will grant access to the respective computers. With this, what will happen? You don't have to, I mean, a person can log into any of the computer, because what we will do, we will create the users in the Active Directory domain controller, and then we will domain on this computer, this environment, and then grant access to the computer. Imagine today you are working in India, tomorrow you are going to US for a business trip for a week, okay, and you want to access some data. Okay, you can talk to your administrator. You can tell, I'm unable to, I mean, I wanted some data which I have kept in my computer OneDrive. Can I be able to log in that data, get the data? Yes. The person, what he will do, the administrator, he will just give you access to one of the computer which is there in the USA with the same username, and all the drives, all the data which map to this computer will be automatically mapped here, so that you will have the data in the newer computer as well. So his work will be very smoother in case of domain environment. Okay, so now you understood domain means it is a security boundary. Any information, or I mean, if you want to access any kind of information, you have to prove your authenticity. You have to enter your username and password, and that username will not be created in the local computer. The username will be created in the server, the domain controller. And with this, the administration will be very easy. You don't need to remember 100 passwords or 100 usernames. One username can, you can give 100 computer access with the same username and password. Okay, and another beautiful thing is the administration is very very easy. Imagine you have around 10,000 computers, and for all the 10,000 computers you need to make multiple changes. What is that? One change is you need to disable the pen drive, another one you need to have the same desktop wallpaper applied, another one is you need to disable the command prompt for all the users. So to do these changes, if you have no work, I mean domain environment, you need to log into each and every computers and do the changes. But in case of domain control, that is not like that. You just have to go to an option called group policies. Just create a new policy, okay, on the OU where all the computers and the users are present. Within 2 minutes, all the 10,000 computers will have the settings enabled. So that's the beauty of domain environment. So the administration will be very easy. And another one is the manual mistakes, the possible manual mistakes, because we are all human beings, we always make mistakes, correct? We are not perfect. So to come out of this kind of challenges, we have brought in a solution called domain. Okay, so now you understood work group and domain are both are different things. Work group doesn't exhibit any security. Work group doesn't provide you to do the centralized control and administration, but domain is a security boundary that will allow you to do the, I mean, that will allow you to control and increase the security and to do the centralized administration, and it will also provide you centralized authentication. Now you are thinking, how can I convert one work group environment into a secured domain environment? Okay, yes, that is possible by using a service called Active Directory Domain Services. Yes, if you have a server, you can install a service called Active Directory Domain Services, and then you can promote your work group into a domain environment. So once you promote your work group into a domain environment, you will be able to obtain some features. What are those features? It will provide you centralized authentication. Means you don't need to create the usernames and the passwords in each and every computer. You will create the username and password in the central administration server, which is called as Active Directory server or Active Directory domain controller. And when the user enter the username and password, there is a protocol called Kerberos. Okay, that Kerberos protocol will take the username and password and go to the domain controller, and it will verify yes whether the user is present or not. Yes, the user is present, and the whatever password he has entered is correct or not. Yes, the password is valid. Then he will be allowed to log into the computer. So the authentication is not happening in the local computer. The authentication is happening in the remote computer. Okay, that computer is nothing but a domain controller. Okay, so when the user enter the username and password here, the password will be taken to the domain controller here. This is DC01 domain controller, and once the authentication is done, it will give you a token called TGT. TGT means it is ticket granting ticket. Okay, so this is valid for 10 hours. That is the reason if you're already working in some small organizations, when you go to the office early morning, when you enter the username and password, it will take 2 seconds to log in, because within the 2 seconds, less than 2 seconds, I'm just giving an answer logical number. Okay, so less than 2 seconds it happens. Sometimes it is even less than a second. Milliseconds authentication happens. It depends on your bandwidth and the server performance. Okay, so but you can see the difference when you go to the early morning office. If you enter your user, at least it will take 1 second at least. But when you go for a break and come, as soon as you enter the username and password, it will just log in like that, because that time it doesn't talk to the domain controller again, because already a valid token is there for 10 hours. So morning only you have entered username and password, your authentication has already happened, checked, validated from the domain controller, and the domain controller has given you one ticket, the ticket called as TGT, ticket granting ticket, and the ticket is valid for 10 hours. Until and unless you log out and log in, or log off and log in, it never asks the domain controller again. If you just lock the screen, it will not ask the re-authentication. So now you know what is centralized authentication. Means when you enter the username and password, the authentication is not happening in the local computer. The authentication is validated at the domain controller. That is called as centralized authentication. Next one is it provides a centralized administration. I just told you in the previous slide, if you want to control or if you want to bring in a settings, in case of workgroup, you need to log into each and every computer. But in case of domain environment, you don't need to log into each and every computer. Okay, so what you have to do, you have to log into the domain controller and go to the OU organization unit or the folders where all the users and computers are kept. Right click on that OU, create a new policy and mention the settings. Less than 2 minutes, you can apply settings for all the available users in the estate. That is called as centralized administration. Means you don't need to log into the computer. You can do the administration in a central store called domain controller. You just have to log into the domain controller. From there on, you can control everything. You can administer everything. That is called as centralized administration. The third one is single sign-on. So, single sign-on means one sign-in is enough to access all your application. If you are already working in some organizations, you might have heard this or you might have noticed this. When you log into the first time office, when you go to the daily everyday morning, when you go office, when your shift starts, you will enter your username and password. After that, probably you will access multiple applications within your laptop, your office laptop. You may ask, you may open your leave application portal, or you may log into your insurance portal, or you may log into any other portal, claims, all those things will be there. Okay, so there it doesn't ask you the username and password, because all the applications you can enable the applications, any applications, with a single sign on. Means one single login is enough to access the remaining applications wherever you have enabled the single sign on. Okay, just to avoid the multiple username and password entries. So when you enter the multiple times, when you enter the username and passwords, it also increases your security risk, because you don't know which plugin is having what kind of tools nowadays. Okay, all the hackers will always be watching all your every movements. not sure when they will capture your username and password, and they decrypt it, then they log into the estate, and they will throw the viruses, and then ask you the ransoms, correct, right? So that is why the Active Directory will provide you single sign on, okay, and it will allow you to log into multiple applications without entering the username and password again and again. That is called a single sign on. Means one single sign on is enough to access the applications whatever have enabled the SSO is nothing but single sign on. Okay, next one is, I'm talking about the domain controller and all, right? So this domain controller is nothing but any Active Directory installed server will be never called as a server, will be called as a domain controller, or DC. DC means it is domain controller. Okay, so Active Directory configured server will be called as a domain controller. So this is the basics of Active Directory. Is it clear, guys? Please have an interactive session. Is it clear? Are you guys able to hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
sir.
yes.
Thank you. So with that, now let us understand little bit deeper, okay? Because from today onwards, I'm using new terminologies, okay? So you need to know the terminologies so that you'll understand better, okay? So with respect to this Active Directory, people may ask you, do you know how many types of components you have in Active Directory? So there are two types of components in the Active Directory. One is physical component, another one is logical component. So before I get into that, any idea what is physical and what is logical? What is physical and what is logical, guys? No idea? What is physical? Today we are doing the session. Is that a physical session or a virtual session or logical session? Hmm?
Virtual session.
This is a virtual session because I am sitting remotely, you are sitting remotely with the help of the internet. Okay, we are feeling, we are imagining, or it is a classroom, correct? Now, because it is just you cannot touch and feel, you can only imagine. Correct. Na? So physical means the components which you can touch and feel. You have your laptop in front of you, you can touch. You have your mobile phone in front of you, can touch and feel it. So physical component means any components you can touch and feel, we call it as a physical component. The logical component means imaginary. Okay, because the logic can vary person to person. When you look at a problem, the logic behind resolving the problem for you is a different. I look at a problem and the logic I use to resolve the issue will be different. Okay, so logical means it is imaginary, physical means it's which you can physically touch and feel. Okay, if you want to understand better, the physical components has got four different physical components. Okay, the first one is RDC. RDC is nothing but the root domain controller. The root domain controller is nothing but the very first domain controller at your office. Say, for example, today you started a startup company. Maybe the company name is mybusiness.com. You are going to create a new website or new domain called mybusiness.com. Okay. And you want to, I told you, to convert Workgroup to domain environment, you need to install Active Directory domain services. So the very first server, whatever you are installing the Active Directory, okay. Say, for example, this is the new computer. Okay, this computer name is Server01. So in this server, you are freshly installing the Active Directory domain service and promoting to the domain. Promoting to the domain. Once you install the Active Directory and promoting to the domain, we will call this first domain controller as the RDC. The very first domain controller in your estate, we call it as RDC. So your business started in Bangalore, you getting good responses, and in the region of Hyderabad also, or Delhi also, your demand for your the demand for your product is increased. So what you thought, to have another office set up in Hyderabad or Delhi. Okay, let me consider Hyderabad. So in Hyderabad also you have hired about 500 employees. Here also around 1,000 employees are there now. Okay, you have businesses giving a good mileage to you. then you started to have, extend your office to Hyderabad as well. You have purchased an office, you set up an office, okay. But when the users are started logging into the mybusiness.com web domain from the Hyderabad, it will take some delay, because when they enter the username and password, when they access any application, all the way that will travel from Hyderabad to Bangalore. In between, there are a lot of network junctions are there. They have to pass each and every node and come here. Correct? Huh? To come out of the delay, the latency, what you thought, to have an additional domain controller to fulfill the needs of the Hyderabad location, you have added another server called server 02, okay, in Hyderabad location, and you are going to add as an additional domain controller to this. For what? Mybusiness.com. Mybusiness.com. For this domain, you have added one more additional domain controller, or one more additional server, and that server we call it as additional domain controller. So basically, RDC means it is the root domain controller, the very first domain controller at your office. And either you see, it is not necessarily you need to add it in Hyderabad only. Maybe in Bangalore only your business is getting expanded. Maybe 1,000 user has become 3,000 users. Okay, then the capacity of the RDC may be varied. I mean, like, the performance of the RDC may be reduced, because the capability of the server may be 1,000 users or 1,500 users, but you are asking the domain controller to fulfill the 3,000 user need. He may have little latency. So what you thought, maybe to add an additional domain controller Bangalore office only, so that both will share the load. If 10 users logs in, 5 user will go to the DC01, another 5 user will be redirected to the DC02. So I mean, you don't need to do that. The domain controller it is a very intelligent server or a service. He will manage everything. Okay, so either in the same location you are going to add an additional domain controller, or maybe different location you are going to add an additional domain controller. Anyway, that is called as an additional domain controller, no matter it is the same location or different location. If you are adding another server to take the load, that is additional domain controller only. Clear? Guys, clear?
Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. So now the child domain controller. So your business started in the Bangalore in India, okay, and you got a contact. Maybe you are, now your product is moving towards onshore, okay. Maybe in US also you started. You thinking to you have a plan to start an office in US also, okay. That time, US business, I mean, the norms are different. Indian business norms are different, correct? Na? Maybe they have their own regional restrictions. We have our own regional restrictions, correct? Na? You may not be able to leverage the same mybusiness.com there. You may need to separate, because managers are different, MDs are different, administration entirely different, correct? Na? So what you thought, same business, you have started in a child business there. What is the child business? Maybe a new domain called usa.mybusiness.com. Pardon me for my handwriting, okay. So you are going to start a new venture called usa.mybusiness.com in the USA, okay. So you see here, this is your child. It is a new domain. USA is a new domain, and the parent domain is mybusiness.com, because you already have in India mybusiness.com. Like Tata Motors, Tata groceries also there, okay, and Tata softwares also there, consultants are there, okay. There are a lot of business in the Tata, correct? Na? So the Tata is the main, the parent domain, and they have multiple subsidiaries, okay. So that is called as parent and the child. So if you are creating a new domain for the existing parent, we call it as a child, okay. And he shares the common namespace. See, if you consider microsoft.com, you have multiple: uk.microsoft.com, usa.microsoft.com, india.microsoft.com, okay. All the other chains will share the common namespace called microsoft.com, because you are, each and every company, each and every country have got their own restrictions. So all the companies, I mean all the countries will not have the same norms, business norms. Okay, that is the reason they segregate the business to control them separately. Okay, that is called as child domain controller. The next one is read only domain controller. So what is read only? Any idea what is read only, guys? Any idea what is read only, guys? So read only means you cannot do any write operations, correct na? You can only read the things. So say for example, I said Bangalore you have an office. One more office is there in Mangalore, because Mangalore you have shift bands and all. Your business raw materials will come via ship, and you will take the handover of the materials and all. Okay, from there you will distribute the materials. So you have an office in Mangalore also. Okay, but in Mangalore you don't have multiple users. Only around 50, 100 users are there. Just for the 100 users, if you put an additional domain controller, there is lot of investments also there. What are the investments? You should have a data center first. Means you should have one data center room, and you have to invest AC power, and also you have to buy the hardware, big hardware, and you have to find the licenses, and you should have an engineer to manage it. So to come out of this all burdens, all administration burdens and expenses, what you thought? You thought of having a read-only domain controller for a small computer. What you do? You will install the Active Directory role, okay, and you will configure it as a read-only domain controller. So what happens? Say for example, this is my server 01, right? So this is my server 01. This is DC 01. This is my root domain controller. So in your Mangalore office, you have a small server. Okay. And you will add this as a RODC. When you add this as an RODC, whatever contents are there in this domain controller, everything will be synchronized to this machine. So you have 1 lakh users, 1 lakh computers, all the 1 lakh and 1 lakh user and compute, everything will be come and sit here. So when the user in Mangalore, when they enter the username and password, it will not go to the domain controller. It will only go to the location read-only domain controller and get the authentication done. And I told you the copy of the data which is from the DC 01 will be coming and sitting it in the RODC 01. Correct, right? And you cannot do any operations. You cannot create a user account. You cannot reset the password. You cannot even grant access. You cannot do anything in the read-only domain controller. You can only do that authentication. That's all. You can only get the authentication done. Why this is? Because every time when the user from Mangalore location enter the username and password, if you are waiting for this DC 01 which is there in the Bangalore to authenticate, it takes time. It takes time, correct na? So the delay, just to avoid the delay and just to avoid the risk of transferring the data from one region to another location, so we are avoiding that risk, increasing the performance and reducing the latency. That is the RODC. Okay, read only domain controller means it doesn't exhibit any operations, it will only exhibit the authentication operation. That's all. So these are all the logical components we have. Is it clear, guys? Physical component, any questions, any doubts?
No,
No,
sorry.
it's clear.
Thank you. So now let us move on to the logical components. So logical components, they're similar to the physical components. We also have the logical components. Okay. In the logical components also we have 4 logical components. Okay. So the first one is forest. Second one is tree and domain and the OU. So now can somebody tell me what is a forest mean? Have you ever heard a called forest? Have you ever heard a word called forest, guys?
Yes.
What do you mean by forest then?
Like in general, you're asking, right? What is forest?
Yep, yep. In general only. Common
Like,
man understanding when somebody talks about forest.
I mean, something filled with the trees and a mountain.
Yep. So next to my village, I have a. I mean, we have lot of trees. Thick trees are there. Okay, but there is no mountain. Can that be called as a forest?
Not exactly.
Are you sure?
Um, yeah, like sometimes there are also forests with in mountains actually. So we even call it dense forest.
Yeah, means see basically. So one more example. In my next to my village, we only have hills, and that hills doesn't have even a single tree. Can that be called as a forest?
No, it's
Yeah,
only called mountain.
yeah. So forest means it is not necessarily you should have animals. You should have mountains, or you should have waterfalls. No, not like that. Forest means basically collection of trees. If you have lot of trees, thick trees, okay, even bushes also we call it as forest only. So basically forest means it is nothing but collection of trees. If you have large number of forests, okay, we call it as a tree, large number of trees we call it as forest, isn't it? Isn't it, guys?
Okay, sir.
Yes.
So the collection of trees we call it as forest. But you are right. But I mean, in generally, any forest that will have a little bit mountains, but it is not necessarily you should have the mountains to call it as a forest. If you have trees, that is enough. That is a forest. Okay. So forest means it's collection of trees. That's all. Okay. Then what is the meaning of a tree? A tree means it is nothing but the group of domains, guys. Okay. If I talk about Microsoft as a forest here, say for example, this is a forest called Microsoft. So this Microsoft as a forest, if you call it as, so we have a tree is called uk.microsoft.com, usa.microsoft.com, india.microsoft.com. See, this domains called UK, USA, and India all together, we will call it as a forest, and the forest name is Microsoft.com because they have the continuous and the dedicated namespace. If you look at the forest definition, collection of trees with a dedicated domain namespace or namespace represented. Correct, na? And in each domain, we have this Microsoft.com as a common factor. Correct, na? Because that's a parent domain, and that domain we call it as forest. Understood? Understood or not?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Understood.
So basically now you understood forest means it's collection of trees. So trees means it is a domain. So then what is a domain? Domain you already learnt in the difference between work group and domain. A domain means it's a security boundary. You need to, it will allow you to create username and passwords. It will ask the authentication. It will provide you centralized administration, authentication, single sign and blah blah blah. Correct, na? That is called as domain. Then finally the organization unit. The organization unit means it is nothing but the folder structures available in the Active Directory. Say for example, you have this Microsoft India office. This is your india.microsoft.com. So in India, we have multiple offices now. You have Bangalore office. Within Bangalore, you have multiple departments, IT, okay, admin, sales, correct, na? So this folder structures all together separate, okay, we call it as organization unit. Why do we need this organization unit? Because to store the content or the information in a hierarchical manner. Correct, na? See, when you go to your kitchen, your mom will segregate the things. Correct, na? Maybe daily needs are very handy. Correct, na? Very rarely useful are little on the top. Very rarely use the things will be on the topper. Correct, right? Because it is easy for her to manage the things. Similarly, if you segregate the users based on the department or based on the nature of work they do, it is easy to control. Because say for example, it is not necessarily IT users will have wallpaper similar to the admin department. Correct. Na? Our admin department should have the same access like IT people has got. IT people will always have the higher privileges. They can do anything and everything. But admins, they don't need that much of privileges. They only need their laptop to work, their Excel, PowerPoint things to work, and they will be able to take the printouts of their invoice, blah blah blah, payment related informations. Sales people, they will take the business proposals. Their PPTs should be presented, correct? Na? So they only have their own work. They don't bother about other things. But IT should bother everything to in place. IT people's responsibility is to make sure all the necessary things are in place. Correct, na? So when you segregate the users, what is the advantages? You can, while applying the group policy or while applying the settings, you can apply specific settings according to the department. So admin can only log into the admin PCs. If you have separate folders and you kept all the admin users in the folder, you can create a new policy for this dedicatedly for the admin department. Similarly, sales department. Sales people will normally take the printouts, business proposals, and all. Only sales people should take the printouts. You need to make the restriction for the other users. You can create a group policy and go to the group policy and mention only sales people can use the printer. No other department should use the printout or printer. So that is possible via group policy, and when you have the segregation like this. So this organization unit is nothing but the folder structure where you can store your classes and attributes. So in the Active Directory, each and every users, computers will be called as classes and attributes. Class means your username, your computer name, all these things. Attribute means the properties of it. Say for example, when I take your name, okay, maybe Pavan, I take the Pavan's name or Praveen's name. So Praveen has got first name, last name, correct? His initial, his username, okay, his mobile number. So all these are the attributes. Okay, if you look at this picture, you will understand better. If I talk about the AD structure, whatever I explained in the previous slide, right? The same thing here. If you look at, you have a forest called contoso.com. See, this is Microsoft website. This is Microsoft website called forest contoso.com. That the name of a forest is contoso.com, and it has got multiple domains. See here, the domain name is the first domain, the root domain is contoso.com, and that is the forest name. And you have additional domains east.contoso.com, west.contoso.com. Altogether, three domains we call it as forest. Altogether, these three domains we call it as forest. Understood? And each forest will have its own folder structure. Okay, if you look at the right side, this one, the forest is contest.com. If you look at the trees, east and west are trees, domain east and west are domains. Okay, folder structure, see, OU means it's a folders to store the classes and attributes. Your username, your computer name can be stored within the folder. I'll show you. Okay, classes means your users, computers. Attribute means your first name, last name, your phone number. Okay, your address, your manager name. All those things we call it as a attributes. Hope this is clear now. Before I get into the next one, guys, is it clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Sir.
Now you understood the components. Now you understood the Active Directory structure. So now you know the importance of the Active Directory. Correct? Active Directory is very important to have a healthy estate. Correct? Right? Now we should understand how this Active Directory partitions, the database, will be structured. Okay, the Active Directory partition, Active Directory database is nothing but it is a name called ntds.dat. Okay, if somebody asks you what is the Active Directory database, you can tell it is ntds.dat. See here, this is the Active Directory database file name, ntds.dat. ntds means it is new technology directory service dot directory information tree. So that is the Active Directory database name. That is the default name. Okay, you cannot rename it. Okay, ntds.dat is the Active Directory database. So this database has got multiple partitions because Active Directory is a very intelligent tool. He will segregate each and everything for better performance, better management, and administration to make administration very easy. So he will not dump everything together. He's a very disciplined person. Okay, so what he will do, he has got multiple partitions created within the database of Active Directory. The first partition is schema partition, third one is configuration partition, second one is configuration partition, third one is domain partition, and the last one is application partition. So if you ask me, sir, will there be four partitions by default? No. So when you install the Active Directory, we will only have three partitions. Okay, schema, configuration, and domain partitions. But when you integrate any application, say for example there are multiple applications can be integrated with the Active Directory, because I told you know, when you create a root domain controller and the additional domain controller and the child domain controller, the replication will happen among each domain controller. If you create a user in Hyderabad domain controller, the same copy will come and sit in the Bangalore domain controller. Or if you reset the password in Bangalore domain controller, the same copy will be sent to another domain controller, will be available in the network, so that the data will be synchronized and consistent across all the domain. So similarly, we have some applications which need the replication as well, which needs the authentication should happen. So that time, what it will do, the Active Directory, it will create a separate partition to store the information of the application which get integrated with the Active Directory, because you don't jumble the things, you don't mix up the things with its databases. You will create separate partition, okay, and he will store that information in the partition called application partition. Okay, so now you know ntds.dit is the Active Directory database. It's a new technology, directory service dot directory information tree. By default there are three partitions: schema partition, configuration partition, and domain partition. And the last one, application partition, that will get created when you integrate an application with the Active Directory. Otherwise only three partitions will be there. Okay, but you explain four partitions if an interviewer asks you. So now let us understand the importance and the what exactly each partition will do. Okay, the schema partition is there now. This partition is a main partition because it stores all your classes and attributes. Okay, it stores all your username, computer name, all the classes and attributes it will store. When you create a username and password, it will store in the schema partition only. Okay, so then the configuration partition. So I told you, no, you can create multiple sites in a Hyderabad domain controller and read only domain controller in Bangalore, and in Bangalore you have root domain controller. This information of the configuration, right? That configuration kind of information will be stored in the configuration partition. It will also keep hold of how many domain controllers we have, how many DNS servers we have in the estate. So that kind of information will be stored in the configuration partition. Means how many domain controllers we have, which domain controller is added recently, which to which site it is added, for Bangalore, Hyderabad, or Mangalore, which site it is added. So such kind of information, all the configuration related informations will be stored in the configuration partitions, guys. That's all. And the next one is domain partitions. Anything related to the particular domain like UK, US, or India, that will be stored in the domain partitions. Okay, the domain partition stores the information of the user accounts and passwords. User account is different, user name is different, guys. Your name is manjunath.tg. Say for example, your name is manjunath.tg. Your account can be manju.tg. Correct. Now, when you log into the Facebook, your display name will be different, but the username you enter to log into the Facebook account or Instagram account is different. Correct. Now, that is the user account and the password. Those information will be stored in the domain partitions. Hope this is clear. And the next one is application partition. Application partition, I already explained you. Any application that you will integrate with Active Directory, that partition will be stored. That information will be stored in the application partition. For example, this DNS is there. DNS is nothing but domain naming system. It is one of the service which will help you to resolve an IP address to host name and vice versa. See, we are all human beings. For us, remembering the strings, the names will be easy, very easy. If you give 100 names, we can easily remember 100 names. Whereas if I ask you to remember 10 numbers, you cannot remember 10 numbers. Correct? Huh? But computer doesn't understand the numbers also. They will only understand zeros and ones. They don't even understand the names. They don't even understand the numbers. They will only understand the binaries, zeros and ones. Okay, that is the reason this DNS is there. No, this DNS will convert the username into IP address, and IP address will be further translated into binaries. Okay, I will explain you when I do the IP address classes. Maybe actually I'm supposed to do the IP address class before this Active Directory, but anyway I started. I'll do after the Active Directory, or maybe once we are done with this theory, we can do the IP address class, and then I'll move into the next one. Okay, so this DNS is helping us to overcome both the challenges. What are the both the challenges? For us, it is easy to remember the name. So to make our job easy, we will create the DNS, and we in the DNS will create the record. What we will tell, okay, say for example, I'm remembering the name called facebook.com. When I enter www.facebook.com, please convert that to the IP address, maybe 192.168.1.10. So this DNS, when I type www.facebook.com, it will go and check inside it, is there any record called facebook.com? If it is there, what is the IP address associated with that? Yes, it will retrieve the IP address from there and it will give it to us. So such kind of applications, data will be stored in the application partition. And remember guys, one thing, Active Directory will never work without the DNS. DNS and Active Directory both are husbands and wife. It is like husbands and wife. Okay, without the Active Directory, without the DNS, Active Directory will never work. But without the DNS, without the DNS, Active Directory will never work. But without the Active Directory, DNS will work. To work with the DNS, you don't need to have the Active Directory. But to work with the Active Directory, you need to have the DNS. Okay, that is the importance of the DNS. So the DNS is very very important to have an healthy Active Directory environment. Hope this is clear. Any questions, guys?
No, sir.
Yeah. So when you are, if you are clear with this Active Directory, right? In order to work with Active Directory, in order to have a healthy Active Directory environment, there are a couple of basic ports are important actually. Those ports should be opened. Any idea about ports, guys? Any idea about
No,
ports?
no.
Okay. Any other guys who are from computer science background? Do we have anyone from computer science background here? Okay. See, when I talk about computer, in the computer we have around 65,555 doors. You don't see them. Okay. But each and every port, it is nothing but the door only. Like if I ask you how many ventilations you have at your home, you will tell, sir, I have two doors and five windows and some of the exhaust, everything you will tell. Each and every vent at your home will be used for a different usage. Maybe one main door to get in and go out of the house, maybe another door to go to your balcony, and you have windows to get the lights and to get the wind, and you have your exhaust to send the hot air and get the fresh air. Correct, right? So each and every vent or each and every door is used for a different purposes. So similarly, computer will also have 65,555 different ports. Those ports are working as a doors. Each and every port will be used for a different purposes. Okay, so in order to have a healthy Active Directory environment, you should also have some ports opened, okay, allowed between your client segment and the server segment. Okay, so see this one. So couple of important ports are nothing but RPC 135, port number 135, TCP and UDP, both RPC, we call it as RPC, remote procedural call endpoint mapper. The port number 135 you need to open, and net bias name means see, when I talk about net bias name in the computer, okay, if you write simply microsoft.com, this is called as FQDN. fully qualified domain name. If I simply tell Microsoft, it is not a qualified domain name. If you simply enter Microsoft, it doesn't open. Say for example, if I want to show you something here, if I go to the browser, okay, if I simply type Microsoft, see, it is not opening any website. It is just going to the Google and getting the suggestions. But if I put Microsoft.com, see, it is FQDN. See, my Microsoft website is opening now. See, that is the difference. If you put simply Microsoft, it is not a FQDN. It is a NetBIOS name. If you put .com, .in, .org, .net, those called as FQDNs. Okay. So FQDN means it will have both prefix and suffix within it. Okay. So this is called as prefix. This Microsoft is prefix. Two portions it is. Okay. Prefix and this is suffix. Oh, sorry. So FQDN means it will have two portions in it. One is prefix, another one is suffix, and that is called as FQDN. This is called as FQDN, fully qualified domain name, and only Microsoft called as NetBIOS name. Network basic input output name. Okay, that is called as NetBIOS name. So, and some of the port called SMB. SMB is nothing but when you try to access data from one computer to another computer, if you want to make that folder visible, that 445, the SMB port should be open. And the important port for Active Directory, people will ask, it is LDAP. LDAP is nothing but it is lightweight directory access protocol. Lightweight directory access protocol, and the port number is 389. Definitely people will ask you this question. This one will ask DNS is 53, Kerberos 88, NTP is 123, and global catalog. So whatever I have marked here, no, those ports will be definitely asked, guys. Take a photo and tomorrow I'll ask you the port numbers. Okay. So these are the ports are very important to have a healthy Active Directory environment. And I mentioned TCP and UDP. Do you know the difference between TCP and UDP, guys? Do you guys know the difference between TCP and UDP? Guys, what is the difference between TCP and UDP? So TCP is nothing but transmission control protocol. UDP means user datagram protocol. That is the definition. But why it is TCP and why it is UDP? So TCP is okay. Let me explain. So TCP means it's connection oriented, guys. Okay. TCP means it is connection oriented. TCP and UDP. TCP is connection oriented. It is connectionless. Earlier days we had landline phones, correct na? We had wired connection there, correct, right? So that time it is never going to happen, like, whatever you speak, the end person used to listen everything. But nowadays those phones are not there, only mobile phones are there, and if there is no network, whatever you speak, the person will not get it. If there is no network, then he will tell, oh, I'm unable to hear you, can you please repeat, can you please repeat, correct na? Or pardon, I'm not able to hear you. You will tell that because that UDP doesn't give you acknowledgement. TCP will give you acknowledgement. See, TCP make sure if I send you hi, hello, how are you, the TCP make sure all the three packets will be reached to the destination. UDP is not like that. Whether you're receiving it or not, it will simply throw, that's all. That is called as UDP. TCP is connectionless, TCP is connection oriented, UDP is connectionless. TCP give you end-to-end acknowledgement. End-to-end packet capture will happen, end-to-end packet transfer will happen, you will get the acknowledgement. Until and unless it reaches all the three packets, hi, hello, how are you, okay, TCP will never leave. But UDP is not like that. Whether the receiver listen or not, he will simply throw the packets, simply dump the packet. That's all. Whether you are listening or not, he don't bother. Okay, that is the difference between TCP and UDP. Okay, so whatever mobile phones are wireless, whatever nowadays we have, everything is UDP only. TCP means you have the connections. That's all. I mean, there are a lot of differences are there. Please go and watch in the YouTube. Okay, or just read on the TCP and UDP. I don't want to make confuse and I don't want to deviate to for another topic. That is the reason. So better to understand the basics of TCP and UDP. TCP means it's connectionless, and UDP means TCP means connection oriented. UDP means connectionless. TCP will give you end-to-end acknowledgement and confirmation. UDP doesn't give you end-to-end acknowledgement. And TCP is very secure. UDP is unsecured. And TCP give you HTTPS. UDP doesn't give you HTTPS. That is the difference. Okay. Hope this makes understand clear.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So what we will do, I have another 4 5 slides that will take another 20 minutes. So I don't want to extend the class almost 7 minutes. We have over exceeded actually. Okay, I'll stop it here, and tomorrow we can get started from here. Is it okay?
Okay, sir.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Let me stop the recording.